Hi guys, welcome to the Nutrify Today C-Suite Summit and the Nutrify Today C-Suite Summit talk show over here. We've got a very interesting talk show and two very eminent gentlemen. It's a pleasure to have them with us. I'm KK, your anchor for this talk show. And we have with us Eric Caston, who's the general manager of AstaReal Fuji. And we also have Pankaj Negi, who's the president for India for AstaReal Fuji. Great pleasure to have you guys on this talk show. What we'll discuss over the next half an hour or so is India-Japanese nutraceutical opportunities. Now, there's a lot of nutraceutical activity that's happening in India and globally. That's the future segment. As somebody was saying the other day, I probably buy pharmaceuticals maybe once a month, at the most twice a month. Whereas nutraceuticals, I buy multiple times a month and I actually consume every day and maybe 2 or 3 of them. And that probably is the amazing canvas that we have for nutraceuticals, and that probably is the base for this entire discussion. There's a lot of interesting activity happening both in India as well as in Japan. India, the indigenous nutraceuticals. India is seen as the hub of nutraceutical activity, and India is seen as $100 billion nutraceutical opportunity market. And India is seen as the fulcrum of the global nutraceutical industry. Japan have their own indigenous nutraceutical formulations, ingredients as well, and also a lot of innovation happening over there. So a fusion of both this is what will be tremendous to look forward to over the next half decade or so. On this note, Eric, if I may start with you, on what I said, this kind of a fusion between Japan and India sounds very exciting, doesn't it?
It really does. And there are, as you mentioned, surprisingly a lot of parallels between Japan and India, not just in society, but in the nutraceutical industry. Both societies, tradition is still very strong. So you have a traditional society that's right beside a rapidly modernizing society. That has advantages, that also has problems. Especially in Japan, the food there sometimes almost functions as a nutraceutical. The food that you eat every single day functions as a nutraceutical. On the Indian side, a lot of the Ayurveda herbs, the local traditional herbs, great for health. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to combine, in some cases, the Japanese lifestyle with the Indian ingredients, put that together. Very exciting for not just the industry, but for the health of both societies. So we're very happy to be able to serve as a bridge between Japan and India in this small way in the nutraceutical world.
I couldn't appreciate you more for summarizing that in one statement. That both have commonalities, and the commonality is the tradition and the modernity, both going hand in hand. Now, if that's the case, how do you see the vision for the next 5 years for India and Japan and nutraceuticals also working together?
Well, I think when companies like Fuji Chemical, come to Japan or come to India, to do business, we have to pay attention to, to the local environment, the local situation, and that's what Fuji Chemical has been doing in India now for, I think, over 20 years. One of the things that we focus on in nutraceuticals is the science. We don't think that you should sell a nutraceutical unless there are some clinical studies that support the benefits that are on the label there. And if you look at what our company has done with our particular ingredient, which is a nutraceutical ingredient called astaxanthin, I think we've done close to 80 human clinical studies. Most of those or many of those are in Japan, you can imagine. Many of those were done in Sweden, the United States. But if you look at a map of where all those studies are, there's still only a very few of those studies that have been done here in India. And that, when we look going forward, what do we see over the next 5 years or so? We've already got these learnings from the clinical studies that were done in Japan at Japanese universities. Now we want to replicate those here in India using Indian universities, Indian CROs, which have really great capabilities. And we want to show that these ingredients that were developed in Japan are now effective in the Indian consumer. So that's really going to be our focus over the next 5 years, I think.
I'm going to come back to you on that clinical trials aspect that you said. That's going to be an important part of the discussion. For the moment, Pankaj, if I may come back to you.
Sure.
You've been in India for a long time, and you had the India business for AstaReal, and you understand the Indian market and the dynamics for nutraceuticals so well. You guys have actually launched the original astaxanthin in India as well. What's your experience in Indian nutraceuticals, and particularly with the original astaxanthin?
Okay, so KK, first, thanks a lot for having us on the show. Especially, as Eric said, Fuji has a very rich history and long history in Indian market. We came 20 years ago. At that time, I think nutraceutical was pretty new term for the Indian market. The Indian society and Indian markets more on the pharmaceutical driven. India is a more generic pharmaceutical across the world. We are known as a pharmaceutical capital of the world, right? In terms of producing thousands and thousands of pharmaceutical formulation. I think the nutraceutical terms, as the education level became high, the disposable income became high, the revolution in internet, people became aware about the health and the nutrition, and that where I think probably the trends of self-care and how to take care of the health became the very common term. If you look at the last 1 decade, I think people are becoming more and more. They are educating themselves, going to Google, checking what is good for them, and that kind of trend, I think Fuji was one of the first company to tap on. So I recall when we launched our astaxanthin in India first, initially there were some synthetic forms. People didn't know whether it's the color or nutrition. So it took a lot of time for us to educate first the pharma and nutrition companies, and thereafter it went up to the consumer level. So right now, if you look at the trends in India, I think the nutrition has become one of the big industry, and Nutrify India pushing its agenda and pushing its mission to put India on the global map and make it a $100 billion industry. And I'm pretty sure that the number is not too big. If you look at the India pharmaceutical industry, it's already pretty mature. We are exporting to all over the world. If you look at the food industry, it is already so mature, and nutraceutical come in between. So you look at the industry-wide, the pharmaceutical companies are coming into nutraceuticals, the food companies are coming to nutraceuticals, and it's a huge consumer base. We are 1.4 billion people. If you look at during the COVID time, there are more than 600 million people took nutrition. There was no doctor recommending those nutrition. People are becoming self-aware. I know it was a little bit of because of the COVID, but the wave after that, the education after that, I think it's going to push entire industry to the next level.
I couldn't agree with you more. One has seen a significant surge post-COVID.
Absolutely.
And the awareness that was generated of nutraceuticals was amazing during that period. As we always say, not that COVID should have happened, but certainly at that point in time, the awareness that was generated was substantially higher than probably it was before. Now, Pankaj did mention about, Eric, the people getting more and more aware due to internet and also, if I may say so, digitization, right? Moving forward, okay, there could be pros and cons for this, right? So do you think the pros will be more than the cons in terms of the awareness and the knowledge that's been created due to digitization?
I think on the knowledge aspect, I think it's good for nutraceutical brands like us that are operating globally, because I've been lucky enough to be coming to India for several decades now. I had a conversation, like many of us, I'm concerned about my health. I was having a conversation with a guy here. We touched on exactly the same things, even though he's living here in Mumbai, I'm living in Tokyo, someone else is living in America. Oh, intermittent fasting. Do you do keto? Do you do paleo? Plant-based, protein? You're going to do in the personalized nutrition, or are you using the app that tracks your things? So that aspect of the internet is very helpful, because what's going to resonate in Tokyo is also going to resonate in Mumbai, because we really are all becoming global citizens. There's other aspects of digitization and the internet which are going to be less positive. One is the spread of misinformation. Can you trust these things? That's where we feel a responsibility again to go back to the science. We're going to sell stuff that we have done the research on, so consumers can say, hey, if I see this AstaReal mark or this Fuji mark, at least I know that the research has been done on that. So digitization, like many things, I think will be a double-edged sword, but on the balance, I think it's going to be positive because you're going to have, I think, global citizens that are more educated and more aware of trends that are happening in Japan, happening in Mumbai, happening in Los Angeles, and that has to be good for companies that are operating on a global level, I think.
Good to see that positivity from you, saying that there'll be definitely more benefits and advantages, to the digitization as we see it. The reason I brought this in is, and maybe both of you can think about it and we can chat about this. And I mentioned this in the Nutrify Today Summit as well. The awareness now is so much that it's a true incident. Just the other day, I went down and I was purchasing something from the retailers, and here come a couple of young girls, and they want to pick up something. All right, one of the girls wants to pick up something. Somebody has recommended that, and she sees it, the label, and says, "No, it doesn't have green tea extract, so I don't want it." All right, 15 years back, 10 years back, nobody would have known. So there's something called green tea extract. All right, today everybody talks about turmeric.
True.
Suddenly people are talking about ginger. Yeah, what you said about post-COVID and stuff like that. Ginger, turmeric, XYZ. Now, the other statement the other girl made is what will bring me to the clinical studies which you started off from. The other girl said, in any case, don't bother about it. Most of them don't have enough of green tea extract that is needed. This awareness may increase. Okay, so how much of each of those ingredients? That is probably one of the things that nutraceuticals will have to address as I see it moving forward. That's where clinical trials and establishing the dosage may become very important. Do you guys agree with that? Maybe start with you, Eric.
No, I absolutely agree. That's one of the reasons that that we do clinical studies. I think in the case of our company, we're pretty unique because we brought this particular ingredient, the AstaReal astaxanthin, from the introduction to the market, did the basic research, back in the day when we were doing very low dose studies. Okay, this works, this is safe and effective. Then we did a slightly higher dose. Okay, this works, this is safe and effective. It takes a long time because you have to gradually build up, to show that, okay, it is effective and safe at this lower dose, but we see a linear response, but it maintains its safety. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it in the end because, as you said, consumers are becoming more and more savvy. They understand that if it doesn't have an effective dose, probably not worth taking.
Pankaj, Eric just mentioned that we're looking at, that's precisely the reason why we're looking at doing more and more clinical studies in India with such a grip of the Indian regulatory scenario. How do you see it moving forward? Clinical studies for nutraceuticals, and maybe particularly for something like an AstaReal, astaxanthin, and stuff like that.
Yeah. So, KK, I think since we are dealing with the human health, right? I think it's a responsibility of the organization, to deliver something which is safe for the human health. And there, where I think a company like Fuji Chemical or XYZ, they come into play. We want to deliver which is something safe and efficacious, because if you are doing something with the human health, it becomes your responsibility, not just only selling the product. And again, from the regulatory side, I think the FSSAI, they are pretty clear on that, right? Although the framework of the regulation is still evolving, but there is the rules and regulation are already penned down, and they are very clear that what you can sell, what you cannot sell, what you can claim. Although I think probably there are more than 20,000, the pharma company in India, and I think thousands of nutraceutical and food companies, right? It's become very difficult to policing around everyone. But rules are already there. And there are products with the mislabeling, but it becomes, I think the industry should come together, and at least the advocacy has to be there about the education, because you need to help the regulator to help us, because single alone body cannot policing around everyone. But I think it's industry moral responsibility to deliver something which is safe and efficacious.
I like what he said, Eric. He said, help the regulator to help you. I think it's a lovely philosophy to follow. Now, when we want to talk of clinical trials, Eric, do you see the same methodology and the process as in pharmaceuticals, phase 1, 2, 3, and then registration, and then commercialization type following in nutraceuticals as it emerges along? It's an evolving process, as we discussed.
That's a very good question, and I think in that sense there are some clear difference between pharmaceuticals and nutraceuticals. In nutraceuticals, we're in most cases trying to prevent disease, maintain health. You're not trying to cure a disease that's already in process. I mean, prevention is the best cure. Has been said many times, because that is absolutely true. So I think
prevention is one aspect. I think everybody's talking about is the wellness segment as well. Please go ahead.
We don't just want to live. We want to
live well,
and be healthy. So those goals are different than the goals for pharmaceuticals. You can talk about the different phase of pharmaceutical trials. We think that you can't apply exactly the same standard to pharmaceuticals as nutraceuticals, because the goal is different, of course. But having said that, when you look at the claims on nutraceuticals, and here we can talk a little bit about the Japanese nutraceutical industry. Several years ago, and maybe more than a few years ago, certainly 6 or 7 years ago, the Japan authorities created a new functional food labeling system. And what was good about it is it made it very clear what the steps were needed to make a scientifically validated claim on the product. And we've seen that really has had a wonderful effect on the Japanese nutraceutical market, because nutraceutical companies will always find some way to suggest to the consumer, hint to the consumer, that say, studies suggest that this product will improve your health. But the regulatory authorities need to define what does that mean? What type of studies, what level of studies are required to make this type of label claim? And when you give, I think, industry a clear target, and I understand that FSSAI is moving in that direction. When you give industry a clear target that's achievable for nutraceuticals, I think it just creates a virtuous cycle. Companies do the studies to achieve this clear standard for health claim labeling. Consumers then understand that all of the companies are operating according to the same standard, and it's quite good. If you make it too tough, if you make it a pharmaceutical level study that's going to require 20 years, you're going to, not just, stunt the industry, but maybe more importantly, you're going to stop some products that could probably help wellness, help improve health.
Taking a cue from what he said, there are a lot of people who are deep into nutraceuticals in the nutraceutical industry globally, who actually believe that in the next decade or so, one can see curative nutraceuticals. What's your take on that, Pankaj?
Curative nutraceutical, I think it's a pretty, it's still a gray area, right? Because I think there are two. We are talking about the preventive, and when it comes to the curative nutraceutical, I think there where the pharma come into play, right? So there will be overlap between the curative nutraceutical and the pharma. But I think the nutraceutical is going to play more in the preventive. The role is
preventive and wellness.
Preventive and wellness.
Absolutely. Because the wellness is a huge segment.
Absolutely, and you don't want to class as an industry. You don't want to class into that.
Guys, preventive wellness, and maybe let's add one more: the cosmetic segment. People want to look good, and probably there nutraceuticals can play a big role. What's your take?
The beauty. All of us know now the beauty from the within has become one of the big trend, right? You want to eat good, you want to sleep well, you want to take the right nutrition to look young, age gracefully. You want to every day. You want to when you go out, you want to look young and fit. And the beauty from within concept is already there. I think probably it's a more of an Asian concept. In Japan, it's been there for the ages.
Very big.
The people are. If you look at the Japanese aging population, is pretty big. But if you look at the aging process is I can say it's a graceful aging, right? People are aging very healthy. So that way, I think where the nutrition can play nutrition and nutraceutical can play a huge part when it comes from the beauty and beauty from within. But when we talk more on the cosmetic segment, that's I think probably a little bit more again the different industry where you have more of a topical. There are the cosmetic companies there and food and cosmetic company. When it comes to the nutraceutical, I think probably it will be more on the nutrition and beauty from within concept.
We were talking of the aging process, I was just talking to Eric an hour back about the aging process, and he told me, KK, listen, I'm just 24. Probably getting married next month or so, right?
It's been a long engagement, but it looks like we're finally going to do it next
There you
month. She'll be very, my wife will be very happy to hear that I'm engaged.
Are you using artificial intelligence for that as well?
Exactly, yes.
Jokes apart, that brings me to the next one. We spoke about digitization and stuff like that, taking it several leaps forward. How do you see AI in nutraceuticals as it unfolds itself?
I think AI is going to affect everything. That has become pretty clear. We've been very interested in the Nutrify Genie, which I understand is a homegrown.
Nutrify Today, yeah,
the Nutrify,
course,
the Nutrify Genie,
brilliant,
which is a
platform,
homegrown technology here in India. I joked with a meet of Nutrify. I was like, hey, the Nutrify Genie cannot run the clinical study that we need. And that's not yet possible. But what we think, and how we think Fuji Chemical will probably try to leverage the Nutrify Genie, my understanding of how this AI works, it can help you to understand need gaps in the market. It can help you understand what type of ingredients you could need for certain claims, and that can help you to direct the clinical study and direct the science. We heard presentations yesterday about how artificial intelligence can help to direct and help you to understand what consumers actually need. So I would say in the near term, that type of AI analysis of the market, showing you where you should do your next clinical study, what you should do your next clinical study on, I think that's something that would be helpful for us in the very near term, not in the distant future, but in the next 2 years when we decide and plan our next clinical study. We may have done that with input from Nutrify Genie, for example.
It's a brilliant platform, I can tell you. Nutrify Genie, a great initiative by Nutrify Today, as has been so many of their initiatives. Just moving on to this artificial intelligence I was talking about, establish the consumer need, and then look at how do I service that need, what's the kind of product, in what proportion. And also, one of the advantages of nutraceuticals is different formats in which it can be delivered, right? So you see that different formats expanding more over the next 5 years or so?
Absolutely. One of the things, as Eric already mentioned about the AI, I think AI is going to play a huge role when it comes to the nutraceutical industry. We have seen in pharma AI, the use of AI is already there, right? You look at the product development cycle in pharma on food or nutraceutical, it's at least 2 years. And if you are dealing with the thousands of products, as the market grows, or we are targeting $100 billion in industry, that means as the demand rise, you need to service the entire industry. And without that technology or new age technology, it will be very difficult. And the use of AI will not only solve many problems, but at the consumer level, you will have AI can actually draw a pattern, an algorithm can draw a pattern that what consumers are buying, what they are rejecting, what time they are buying, what kind of products, what kind of label claims, and it can read the consumer behavior. All these data can draw a pattern and help you to take the smart decision. You can all take it back to the product development so that the next time you can deliver a product which is more consumer friendly, which is more, more indication based, which is more the category friendly. So entire feedback through the technology, I think probably will be great for the industry, and people can make those changes quickly.
You actually brought me to the next point that I was going to touch upon when you mentioned about different health categories. Do you see AI helping nutraceutical companies in arriving at multiple health categories that they may want to focus on? Like you said, aging is one of the things that you guys are. Do you look at multiple health categories for AstaReal and Fuji, and overall as nutraceuticals, do you see AI as an effective tool for that, identify multiple health categories?
Absolutely, I think the AI-based technology or new age-based technology, Eric just mentioned, they can definitely identify gap in the market. Right now, what is happening? Let's take an example of a clinician in any pharmaceutical or nutraceutical company, right? They have to go through all the data, the clinical trials, maybe the historical data to identify, the pharmacokinetics or the mechanism of action of any ingredient. Maybe the ingredient may offer 10 benefits, but humanly it's not possible to identify each and every one. And look at the way every year the new diseases are coming up, right?
Absolutely, fair point. Yeah.
I think AI can definitely draw a pattern and at least indicate you that where the gap is, how these new disease or nutrition deficiency are coming, and then what could be a right solution for that. So the role of the AI is inevitable, I think, and the AI or AI type new technology, they can definitely identify the need gap and indicate some of the solution based on the historical data or based on the all the ingredient clinical data we have.
Do you reckon that, on that note, there probably would be some predominant health parameters or conditions that would be greater opportunities for nutraceuticals, or would it be relative to the geography and the country?
I think it's certainly relevant to the geography and the country. And one of the things that we've learned, we mentioned doing clinical studies now over 20 years on our particular ingredient. When you do clinical studies in a wide range of areas and you have solid science in each of those areas, companies will adopt the ingredient depending on the needs of their consumers. And that brings us to some of the areas that we're looking at specifically in India. We mentioned digitization and AI. All of this stuff requires you to look at what? You have to look at your smartphone. We have children that are going to school, studying on tablets, come home looking at a smartphone, then they're playing games. One of the areas that we think our particular ingredient can help is in the area of digital eye fatigue.
Yeah.
That has been shown that astaxanthin can reduce the symptoms of the tired eyes, the blurry eyes, the strained eyes that you experience when you look at your smartphone all day or when you look at your computer all day. We've shown that in Japanese subjects multiple times. We're currently conducting a study to show that it's also effective here in the Indian population. You have a huge IT industry, huge engineering industry. I know that the schools here are tough, and the students are spending all day not just looking at screens, but traditional paper tests. We have an ingredient that we think we can show in the Indian population helps with that problem. And then another problem, which is maybe more global, is the issue of fertility.
True.
Oh yes.
It's not,
yes.
To my knowledge, we don't quite understand why globally fertility problems are increasing. Globally, sperm counts are dropping.
Absolutely.
Globally, you see an increase of polycystic ovarian syndrome, which affects women's fertility. Again, based on research that was done, by AstaReal back in 2005, we have a good indication that AstaReal can help in that area. So this is something that we're working with local brand holders here in India, is to design studies that will show that astaxanthin can help assist in fertility and fertility treatment. So it's definitely got to be tailored to the needs of the local country and the local population, and we're looking forward to doing that.
Whilst what you're saying is what a whole lot of people are saying, there are certain folks in nutraceuticals, Pankaj, who are talking of the possibility of one product, all geographies globally. Do you think that is, for now, too far-fetched an idea? Or do you see that happening at some time?
Especially this is like a good problem for us. Look at the astaxanthin. There are more than 131 human clinical trials, and as I mentioned, that 80 of those human clinical trials either sponsored by us or conducted on our material. Sometimes the science becomes too good to be true if you're trying to solve everything with one ingredient. But the thing is that we have tried those, the evidences are there. But I don't think so for all the globally one product fits all, all the category. It has to be, as Eric said, geographically wise, tailor-made. Let's say in some of the geography, some of the diseases are prevailing. In another geography, maybe those diseases are not that much. It could be the different region, maybe the nutrition they take in that, like let's say in Southeast Asia, people are more on the eye health and skin, where in the in the Indian subcontinent, the fertility is, although we have a huge population, but you look at the fertility markets, it's exponentially growing. And some of the area like aging population in China and in some of the Asian countries where the aging is becoming a big issue, right? So I think different geography, they have a different nutrition need. And if you have a science in all the areas, you can always a tailor-made solution for different geographies.
But yes, I like to underscore once again and underline what both of you said. Eye fatigue may be one huge futuristic indication because it's common in every household.
True. Yeah.
For by the end of the late evening or even early evening, you find people actually their eyelids drooping down and stuff like that, and they're saying that I'm having some kind of an unrest there,
right.
Probably because of the, as you said, looking at your smartphone or the laptop the whole day and stuff like that. Coming back to the geography angle that you said, we started off from there, and maybe we can end there as well. Talking of India and Japan, you rightly said that there is tradition with modernity, right? So do you think that between India and Japan, as far as nutraceuticals is concerned, you'd find both ways a trade going on, that import and export from both countries, so that it becomes a win-win situation as we move along?
Yes, and I think we already see that in just the efforts that our company is doing. It's just really become very natural. We started by introducing our ingredient, here in India, where it became quite popular. But then we realized, okay, we're here. We've also got tons of manufacturers, tons of contract research organizations that can help us to increase the value of our ingredient. So we're seeing instances now where we're bringing our raw ingredient here into India, working with companies that they're doing the value-added processes, and then we're able to take that back to sell in Japan, in other markets. And then I think what's been touched upon again and again during this summit is India is just a treasure trove of natural ingredients. Natural ingredients, of course, resonate in Japan possibly more than anywhere else because of the deep connection with nature. So then that will be the next stage. We brought our Japanese developed ingredient here to India. Now we want to take some of the Indian ingredients back to Japan. The cycle will continue, I think, in that way.
So do you finally reckon that that pie will increase, in the sense that on the one hand, service more and more consumers of their need, and in the process also commercially both the countries benefit significantly higher?
Oh, definitely. I mean, anytime you see more communication, more exchange back and forth, I mean, in my experience, that has always been good. That's going to be beneficial to to both countries. Any type of even small amounts of harmonization when it comes to trade and regulatory regulations. I mean, right now the harmonization between the Japan nutraceutical market and the Indian nutraceutical market is probably approximately zero. So any steps in that direction, where what's acceptable in Japan is acceptable in India, what's acceptable in India and vice versa, those type of efforts will absolutely help to increase the pie, if you will, on both sides. And I understand that Nutrify Today has some plans to be involved in that type of harmonization and coordination between the Indian nutraceutical industry and authorities and the Japanese nutraceutical industries and authorities. And Fuji Chemical being a Japanese company, we definitely want to to assist in those efforts, and we think that Nutrify Today will be very helpful in that type of cross-country cooperation.
On that note, Eric and Pankaj, thank you very much. It's been very insightful and a wonderful talk show and discussion with both of you. And let's all hope for a great future for Indo-Japanese nutraceutical relationships.
Thank you.
Thank you, KK.